Hi guys, today we're gonna do a video that I have been putting off for quite some time. I've seen people do this recently and it kind of just reminded me that maybe it was time for me to do this again as well. So we're gonna do another one if I could only keep 10 palettes, which is so hard. If you've been around for a while, you know I have a very big collection of eyeshadows. Eyeshadows is my true love. It's what I really enjoy about makeup. There are so many things about makeup that I really don't care about, that I do the steps because I feel like it completes the look. But for me, like, playing with eyeshadows is what I really enjoy. So I have a ton and it's tough for me to kind of pick between my babies because I just have so many amazing palettes that picking on only 10, I know this is like a first world problem, obviously, and most people don't have as much makeup as me, but for me, this is hard. So I think we're just gonna go ahead and jump in. So obviously, I'm gonna try to make sure that I cover all my bases, right? I gotta make sure I have everything that I would normally use in my eyeshadows. And so there's gonna be quite some larger palettes in here, which isn't always my favorite, but for this purpose, it seems like it's the right way to go. So I'm just gonna go ahead and start with the, I guess, obvious ones that all of you are probably going to guess are going to be in here anyway. And no, I'm not going to pick all of my Blendbunny palettes, just a couple. I need some of them in here. We're just gonna start with the Blends palette. I mean, this is a rainbow palette of all rainbow palettes. I needed this in my collection and I feel like with these mattes, I can do pretty much everything that I want. But I mean, obviously there are still tones in here that I'm missing, but I love the fact that there is this row of sort of neutrally tones. I have a black, I have a white, so if I wanted to like make these more into pastels, I could do that by mixing it with the white, and obviously there are a lot of beautiful other shades in here as well that I can just do a ton with. So this one had to be in here. It was the first palette that I pulled, and I absolutely knew that there was no chance that I wasn't going to pick that palette. So next up is when it started to get a little bit more difficult because I wanted a couple more of the Blendbunny palettes, but like I said, I didn't want all of them. And it was tough for me to pick the ones that I felt like I would get the most juice out of and make sure that I wouldn't miss the other ones. But I did end up going with the All Done Up palette. And you'll see in this video that I feel like my choices are different this time than they were the other times that I've done these videos, because I feel like my aesthetics have changed a little bit. I'm definitely more into neutrals these days than I used to be, and so there are some more neutral-ish palettes in here because I like mixing neutrals with colorful shades. So I really wanted this in my collection because I really enjoy, like, these two rows in the middle here are just so beautiful, and these shimmers are stunning as well. This is probably my favorite silver shadow in my collection. I love this iridescent shade. I love the gold shade. I think this is just a really beautiful, very practical, I guess you could call it, palette. So I wanted to put this in here as well. And the last of the Blendbunny palettes that I ended up wanting to put in is the newest palette, which is the Lure palette. I almost just dropped it. I've had so much fun with this palette. I think this color story is very much me. I brought this on vacation when I went not that long ago, and I just had a blast with it. This shade up in the corner, which is a multichrome, so beautiful. And I just feel like this is a perfect spring palette. I really love the just the combination of the blues and the greens in here. They just go so well together, and all of these shimmers are beautiful. But as you could tell with the palettes that I picked already, there are very few shimmers in them. So I did need to pull a couple more shimmers just so I could, like I said in the beginning, cover my bases and make sure that I had everything that I sort of needed and wanted in my eyeshadow. So I do have two all shimmer palettes in here as well, this is how I've been enjoying doing my makeup when I'm not filming or I'm not reviewing things. Most of the time I will pick a mostly matte palette, use that, and then pick a mostly shimmer palette or all shimmer palette and kind of combine them and use them together, because I don't know, I find that to be very inspiring, and I don't find myself reaching for just one palette most of the time unless I'm reviewing something. I don't know what it is, but I personally enjoy mixing and matching things, so to me it makes sense to do my makeup that way. I know a lot of people like having it all in one palette, but I like having multiple palettes and sort of mixing them. So this is the Bella Beauty Bar Angles of Illumination 3 palette. This is such a beautiful, beautiful all shimmer palette. I really like the tones in this. I love these two shades as face highlighters. Another reason why I wanted to keep this in here and these two shimmers are so beautiful. These shimmers wear really well on me for being that very creamy emollient formula. I don't find that these crease very much at all, maybe just a little bit, but that is to be expected on my very hooded eyes. So I did decide to keep this in here because I knew that I would get a lot of use out of it. And I also, like I said, picked another all shimmer palette, which I don't think anyone's going to be surprised. This was definitely in my top 5 palettes of last year. I did get this like early last year, I think, and I've had this for quite some time. This palette has also come with me, I think, on all of my trips, which was quite a few last year. I want to say I went on like 4 or 5 trips last year, and I think I brought this every time except for maybe one. But this is the Unearthly Cosmetics All I Ever Wanted palette, and I don't think this is available anymore. I'm gonna try to link the palettes down below if I can find them. There might be some that you can't get anymore, but like these are what I would keep, so I'm not going to take that into consideration at all. But this is just such a versatile palette for me, and I love that there are 3 iridescent shimmers, which I use so much of. Obviously, I could use my highlighters or stuff like that too, and I did consider that when I picked out these palettes, so it wasn't a priority for me to have like inner corner shades in the palettes because I could just use my highlighting palette because that's what I usually do. But there's so many beautiful shimmers in here as well, and I feel like color-wise, these are different than the ones that were in the Bella Beauty Bar palette, so it made sense for me to pick this one as well. Now, with the other palettes that I have in here, these were more of a okay, so now I can have some fun. I feel like I've picked out the palettes that I need, and now I can kind of pick the palettes that I want. I don't know if that makes sense, but this is a new palette to my collection, and I was so torn between like 3 or 4 different palettes for the last spot, and I wasn't sure what I wanted, and I wanted to pick a palette that made me happy to look at. And like I said, this is a new palette to my collection. It's not super, super new, but this is from Simply Posh, and this is the Genuine Gems palette. I've just had such a good time playing with this palette. The formulas are absolutely incredible. I love the shimmer formula in here. They wear so well on me. They're so pretty, so sparkly. And I also just love the selection of mattes in here. Like, this is just such a fun palette. And did I need this? Like, did I not have this in any of these other palettes? I could probably dupe this palette with the other palettes that I picked out, but there was just something about this that just made me happy. And I know if I had it and I only had 10 palettes, I would use this a lot because I reach for this more than I thought I would. So I figured I would pick more of a newer palette too because it still makes me excited. So I figured if it makes me excited, it would be something that I would use. The oldest palette I think that I picked for this is one that was also a little bit of a, I don't really have a lot of this in the other palettes sort of mentality when I picked this out. This one is from Glam Life, and it's the Ice Cream Dream palette. So this is the only pastel palette that I ended up picking for this because I didn't have a lot of pastels in the other ones. And like I said, I can mix to pastels with the blends palette because of the white, but sometimes it's nice to just have pastels that are already made for you. And I like how pigmented these are. I really enjoy this palette as a whole. I think it's a really good quality palette. Has a lot of options, has a lot of beautiful shimmers in here. It's got some neutrals up in the corner if, you know, I wanted that. But I really enjoy this palette, and I thought that having it would be something that, you know, in the spring and summer, if I wanted more, you know, lighter looks, I would reach for it quite a bit. The last 3, I feel like, will they be a surprise? Let's start with this one. I don't think this one is going to be a surprise because this one also ended up very high in my top 5 of last year. I forget exactly which spot it ended up in, but it ended up very high. And this is the Ace Beaute Paletopoly palette. I feel like not enough people talk about this palette because it came with a game, and I think a lot of people were like, yeah, I don't really want the palette because I'm not going to play the game, you know? But honestly, the palette on its own is just so beautiful. The color story in this is, I feel like, very different to anything else that I own. I don't really have anything that I feel like I can dupe this with. And I just think that this is also a palette that makes me really happy if I want to reach for it. And I have brought this traveling once as well, and it's beautiful. I love the shimmers in here. Like, the shimmer up in the corner is so pretty. Like, it's that beautiful sort of sheer-ish, but just very wet looking, and it's just beautiful. I love it. So I figured I would keep this in there as well. And I love the murky tones down in the corner. Like, this little quad here is so yummy. Also, this shade of purple, so pretty. So I wanted to keep that in there as well. The last 2 palettes, these are the palettes that I feel like are maybe a little bit of a curveball. I don't know, but you guys know, I've been saying I've been kind of into neutrals lately, and it was tough for me to narrow down to like which neutral palette I wanted to keep. I was so close to keeping in the Glaminatrix Barely Natural palette, Nearly Natural, Nearly Natural, Nearly Neutral, Nearly Natural I think it's called palette, and it was between that one and this one, and I have just been reaching for this one more. And since I also picked out the Blendbunny All Done Up palette, which is kind of similar to the Glaminatrix one, I was like, I don't really think I need both of those, and if I'm gonna choose between the Glaminatrix one and the Blendbunny one, I really wanted the Blendbunny one because I like the tones in there a little bit more, so I went with this one, and this is the Pat McGrath palette. Some of you might be like, yeah, I knew that. I knew you were gonna pick that because I've been using this so often, and I really, really, really enjoy it. There honestly is something so magical about the combination of the shades in here. Like, I get why people love it so much, and I see the more I use this, the more I understand like just how well thought out this is, not only with the colors, but also the formulas of the colors. Like, everything just makes sense. Love this red shade. I love these three special shades. Like, they truly are special. And I love to like layer these two colors over all of these other ones. Like, that is what they're intended for from what I gathered. I watched a couple of videos of people like explaining how to use this palette and the other Mothership palettes, and these are like the perfect layering shades, and that is how I've been absolutely blown away by this palette, just by playing around with the different tones in here and different textures and just really getting to know the formulas and how they perform together. I think it's just a beautiful palette, and I really, really love these two mattes. Like, these are such a beautiful just neutral crease that can go with absolutely any shimmer ever, and I think it's just a beautiful palette. And also, I spent my own money on this and it was hella expensive, so like, I'd like to get more use out of it. The last palette, this is a palette that I don't think anybody is going to expect me to have in here, and I wasn't really either. I was, you know, like browsing my bookshelf behind me, and I was like, what do I feel like would be the palettes that I would need to feel like I have a complete collection? Like, which ones would I actually reach for? Which ones would I use on a regular basis? And I opened this palette and I looked at it and I was like, I really, really enjoy this palette. And I know that if my collection was limited, this is a palette that I would want to have in my collection just because of how many things I can do with this. And even though I hate the packaging, PLuis. So this is the Unlock Your Creativity palette. I don't know if this has any other name to it. I think that is just what it's called, but this is one of the double-sided palettes that looks like a book. I know some people love the packaging. I hate the packaging. I think it's annoying. And it also like lights up in the front. You probably can't even see that, but there's like light inside of that little keyhole, which is just ridiculous. But this is the first side of it, and I think that these are just so beautiful. Like, this isn't my perfect side, but I know if I had this, if I wanted pinks and purples and oranges, like these oranges up here are so beautiful. This is pretty much like a pure red shade. Like, these two mixed together, so, so beautiful. I don't really have a lot of oranges and yellows in the other palettes, but the side that I'm like the most excited about in here is this one. I mean, you guys can just see by looking at this that this is right up my alley. I love the tones in here. I really like this side of the palette. Like, these, I don't really have colors like this in other palettes, and I also really love like the darker tones in here. And this is just a beautiful, beautiful formula of matte shadows. And even though I could probably dupe this somewhat with the Blendbunny palettes, I knew if I had this, I would use it so often because there are just so many different tones in here that I feel like it would be sort of a hassle to mix together if I were to try to like recreate these tones. So those were my 10 palettes that I would keep if I could only keep 10. Which ones did you think that I would put in here? Are there any that you are very surprised that I put in here? I really, when I first sat down to do this, I was like, the Glaminatrix neutral palette is definitely going to be in here. But the more I kind of like, you know, pulled palettes and looked at them side by side and realized that I actually like the Blendbunny palette a little bit more when it comes to the tones in here. Let me just like compare them to you. So this is the Glaminatrix palette, so it's called Nearly Natural. It is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful neutral palette. But like I said, it is kind of similar to the Blendbunny palette. They're not complete dupes, but there definitely are like, you know, similar shades, as I'm sure you can tell. And I just like the fact that these ones, the mattes, are just a little bit different in tones, and I just like the tones a little bit more in the Blendbunny palette. I don't know what it is. I feel like they're a little bit more saturated, a little bit more punchy. And I also just like the shimmers a little bit more in this one than this one. I don't really tend to go for a lot of like bronzes and very neutral champagne-y shimmers, and I feel like that's mostly what this offers, except for like, you know, there's sort of a grayish shade and a green shade in here, but I feel like the Blendbunny palette has just a little bit more exciting shimmers. I don't know, they're just a little more out there. They scream your name a little bit louder, and I also really like that there's a top of like pastel shades. Like this shade is so beautiful. There's like a hair in here that I can't get out. But yeah, that's why this palette didn't end up being in here. I love it, absolutely love it, and I've used it so much, but I could only keep 10 and it was tough to make the decisions, but these are the ones that I ended up with, and I feel pretty confident in my decision this time, and I feel like the last times I've done these, there have always been palettes that I've been like, I wish I could have kept that as well, and I don't know, but I think if I only had these 10, like I would be pretty content for quite some time, but then I would start missing the rest of my collection. So it's not a reality for me that this would ever happen, because I am not a minimalist. And even though 10 palettes for some people would not be considered a minimalist, that would be it for me. Like that would be a very, very small collection given how many palettes I have right now. I think before I decluttered, I had like 175 palettes and I got rid of at least 50. I can link my palette declutter in the corner if you haven't watched that already, but yeah, I think these are the ones that I would be content keeping this time, but wait until next year, I'll do this again, and the choices are probably going to be completely different because it just depends on my mood too and how my preferences changes over time. So that's going to be it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see some other ranking videos, I can put my playlist up on the screen, and if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.